Well, good evening, good to see you. So good to be with you. I wish I could see you more. But I'm glad to be here tonight. And we are getting close. It's getting exciting. We were just having a meeting planning the Masses of Holy Week. We have to have a special meeting just to plan the Masses of Holy Week. It starts with Palm Sunday. Very beautiful Mass, very palms. We like to hold things. The Catholic faith has symbols, things we hold, touch, ashes on our forehead, palm branches. We receive sacraments, we pour water, we put oil, we eat the host, right? So, Palm Sunday. The Monday is the Chrism Mass. Remember, we were at the cathedral. If you weren't able to go to the cathedral for the rite of election, I do encourage you to go to the Chrism Mass, just to see it. That's the biggest Mass of the year in that church. It's like standing in the room. But it is something to see. And they'll bless the oils, which then we'll bring back here, which you will be confirmed with on Saturday. So that's Monday of Holy Week. And that's open to the public. Then, but the big ones are Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. Holy Thursday, which remembers the Last Supper with Jesus, and then Good Friday, which remembers his death on the cross, and you actually come up and kiss the cross, very emotional. And then Holy Saturday starts in the dark, Jesus in the dark tomb, and then we light a bonfire, an Easter fire, and then light all the candles in church, and then we process them, very dramatic, and you'll receive sacraments. So that's a lot. There's a lot going on. I mean, the critical things are Good Friday. You gotta observe the death. You gotta mourn the death in order to celebrate the resurrection. So you want to have that emotional swing from Good Friday, the somberness, to the joyfulness of Easter. Kind of what the apostles experienced. So rich, so rich. A lot of Catholics don't do it, and they miss so much. Tonight our topic, so we started in the fall with who is God? Who is Jesus? Rediscovering Jesus, discovering Christ. And then we went into the church. What is the Bible? What is the church that Jesus created? Bishops, priests, deacons, Pope. Then we went into the sacraments. What are the 7 sacraments that Jesus gave us? These 7 new ways of praying. Then we went into the commandments, the moral teachings of the church. How do we live this out? And now we're getting into some specific moral topics. Last week, Father Lucan talked about life, respect for the dignity of life, from conception to natural death, right? And everything in between. And I swear, it's like every month there's a new moral issue that becomes a national discussion, right? It's like, what's the issue of the month that's going to be on all the news stations? In one sense, it's good that we're discussing these topics, but on the other sense, we're making all the wrong choices as a nation. We're legalizing bad things. Now, the people involved are just people trying to figure out what is the right way to live. They're confused in the mix, right? We're not condemning people. We're just saying these are big topics, important ones, but we're getting it all wrong. And that's going to have devastating effects on their lives. These aren't arbitrary rules. They're all part of a natural order. And if you violate the natural order, it hurts you. It hurts your relationships. It hurts you psychologically, emotionally. It hurts your marriages. It hurts your children. It just hurts us, right? And so you want to get it right. And that's why Jesus came to earth, to explain the right way to live. So Catholicism is a way of life. It's not just a set of ideas or opinions. It's a creed, it's a set of teachings that Jesus gave us, who is God, who are we, what's the meaning of life. But it's also a way of praying, the sacraments. It's also a way of living the commandments. It's also the corporal works of mercy, the way of serving others, right? It's a whole way of life. You're buying into a whole way of life. It's very comprehensive. It's the most comprehensive explanation of reality. The Catholic religion is the most comprehensive explanation of reality. It doesn't tell us everything because God didn't reveal everything. But it tells us more than any other system, any other philosophy, any other political system, any other religious system. The Catholic Church has a very comprehensive understanding of life. So that's important, right? These aren't just arbitrary rules. So we're going to talk about sexual morality tonight, which is an important topic and a good one, a little bit of a delicate one, right? This is a very personal part of our life, sexual love. I was listening to a talk recently. It was 5 rules that men should break. Come on, I want to hear that talk. 5 rules that you should break. Now, it also applies to women, but it was at a men's conference. So 5 rules that men should break. And one of the rules was, you shouldn't think about sex. Don't be thinking about sex. Like it's a temptation, right? If I think about, is that a sin? Like I have these sexual thoughts. We said that, you can break that rule. You should think about sex. You should think about sex a lot. You shouldn't fantasize about sex. You should think about what's its meaning, what's its purpose, what's the right context, what is it, how do you know? Yeah, we should think about it. We should understand it. We should think about our sexuality as male and female. We should think about marriage and sexual love, children. These are things you should ponder and read about and discuss. But not like in a curious way, like a teenager necessarily, but as an adult, as maturely. So that's what we're going to do tonight. Pope John Paul, who's a saint, thought a lot about sex. His first, when he was a bishop in Poland, he wrote a very thick book called Love and Responsibility, The Meaning of Human Sexuality. Why is this bishop writing a book about sexuality? It's like a big book. He must have been thinking about this for a long time. He spent a lot of time with young adults in Poland and talked about dating and their marriages and chastity and the struggle to be chaste and in purity. Like the Catholic Church thinks about life, it thinks about everything. It's very comprehensive. If God made us as sexual beings, male and female, if He made us with sexual attractions, then that's good. And we should try to understand it and use it well. I think it was the first 13 years of his papacy, it was a long time. On Wednesday, the Pope comes out and gives a little talk to the public. If you're in Rome on Wednesday, go to Vatican City, because you can see the Pope. He just comes out in the square, and he gives a little talk on some topic. Well, for 13 years, Pope John Paul talked about sex. Like, who is this Polish Pope? You know, we've had Italian popes for the past 600 years. We don't get a Polish guy who's talking about sex for 13 years. But it was from the beginning of the Bible, the book of Genesis, all the way to the end of the Bible, the book of Revelation. And how God shows us the proper understanding of our human sexuality. And so all of these teachings of the Pope John Paul, they put them all together, and it's come to be called the theology of the body. If we look at our human body, we learn something about God. It's theology. And if we think about God, we learn something about our human bodies and sexuality. It's a theological topic, the theology of the body. Now, you can get all of his talks in one volume, and they're short talks, you just go through, but there's a lot of summaries of the talks, right? You read these little books, summaries of the theology of the body. And and when you read it, it's very enlightening and very encouraging. So tonight we're going to talk about moral issues, sexual issues. We want to say first, whenever we talk about moral issues, we want to remind people, Jesus and the Catholic Church love you. That's important. The Church exists to love you. The Church brings Jesus' love to us. So Jesus and the Catholic Church loves us. Secondly, Jesus and the Catholic Church want us to be happy. What's the goal of life? In a certain sense, we all seek happiness. Why do we do anything? We want to be happy. Thirdly, Jesus and the Catholic Church know that certain choices we make us unhappy. We call them sins. We observe. She did that, and that made her unhappy. That probably wasn't the right thing to do. We'll call that a sin. Sin is acting in ways that are contrary to your happiness, that are contrary to your goodness. They're not arbitrary rules. It's the way things work. I can say, oh, you got a nice new car. That's a Tesla. Do you put gas in that? Like, no, dude, it's electric. Well, why don't you just push gas in it or something? You got a new car, and this car takes gas. Why don't you just put orange juice in it? See what happens? Because it'll break my car. It's not an arbitrary rule. When you put gas in or orange juice is a lot more expensive. They're just trying to trick you. Just put orange juice in there. This is like this biggest scam. They charge you like $5 a gallon of gas. Just get some orange juice, man. No, it doesn't work with orange juice. It'll break the car. That's the teaching, the moral teachings of the Church. Like, it will break you. And so the teachings are there to show us how to flourish, how to live. We say that the moral teachings of the Catholic Church, if you follow them, you'll be healthy, you'll be holy, and you'll be happy. Healthy, holy. If you break them, if you sin, you won't be healthy, and you won't be holy, and you won't be happy. Right? What is healthy, generally speaking, is holy. Generally speaking. So that's just a precursor. You know that today there's an expression of safe sex. Why why is sex dangerous? I don't understand. Can you what's unsafe about sexual love? What's safe sex? We create these weird ways of acting out sexually that are dangerous and unhealthy, and so we've got to make sure we somehow try to make it safe. You're like, I'll show you how to have safe sex. Get married and have a sexual relationship. That's very safe sex. And it's happy and it's healthy. There's you don't get diseases, you don't get broken hearts, you don't. So, there's so many different issues, moral issues related to sexuality that we're going to talk about tonight. And feel free to ask about anything. But there's so many, it's kind of comical. Well, what does the church say about this? What about this? What does the church say about this? Like, you know what? We believe in God. That's the answer. What do you think about, worship? We believe in God. Well, what do you think about birth control? We believe in God. What do you think about same-sex marriage? We believe in God. We believe in a God who created a natural order, and our job is to conform ourselves to it. If you don't believe that, then you conform reality to yourself. You're kind of the decider, the arbiter. But if you believe in God, God decides the natural order, and we try to follow that order, right? But yeah, if you don't believe in God, it's like no holds barred. You do whatever you want. And I can't even explain it to you why it's wrong, because you'll find out, though, you'll get burned. You will get hurt in the process. But I may not be able to convince you of that until you get there, right? It's easier to know the truth and follow it and not get burned. But some people insist on getting burned and then realizing that burned you, and then okay, now I know. Well, that's a hard lesson, but it's one way to do it. So, conforming ourselves to the reality God gave us. When we look at questions of sexuality, sexual love, like sexual intercourse, for it to be happy, healthy, and holy, has to meet 4 criteria. This is very helpful. You can put a chart, and you can put these 4 criteria, and then you can list all the moral issues. And then just go down the chart. Well, with this issue, does it hit these 4? If it hits all 4 criteria, it should be happy, healthy, and holy. But if it misses one of those 4, even just one, it's sinful. It's not happy, healthy, and holy. So what are those 4 criteria for human sexuality, sexual intercourse? First, a man and a woman. Okay? Man and a woman. Secondly, in marriage. Third, a unitive act where their 2 bodies are coming together in a way that could conceive children, like natural sexual intercourse. And fourth, open to the possibility of conceiving children. So, a natural act of intercourse, the 2 bodies coming together, a general openness to children, to life, because this is how life comes about. But a man and a woman in marriage. 4. So let's go through some moral issues, and you tell me if it hits all 4 or if it misses one of the 4, right? So, sex outside of marriage, premarital sex. St. Paul calls it fornication. Which criteria does it miss? Is it a man and a woman? Yes. What criteria does it miss? Not marriage. You haven't promised your lives together. This is kind of casual sex, right? It's unsafe. Right? Did this person have sexual relations with somebody else? Who might have had sexual relations with somebody else? Do you know how many people you're exposing yourself to when you have sexual relations with this person? You have no idea. Right? It's supposed to be 2 people who save themselves for marriage, having intimacy in marriage. Now, sometimes we fall and we sin, right? Okay. That's the other good news, right? There's always a remedy to any sexual sin. Jesus raises the bar, but when we fail, he is there to pick us up. We're not condemning people. We're weak. Our emotions get ahead of us, right? We fall in love. I'm definitely marrying this girl, so it's okay. How many times have we heard that? Right? So, if we fall, we have the sacrament of confession. We're weak. The Catholic difference is we sin, hopefully not quite as much as everybody else, but we sin a lot. But the Catholic difference is, but then what do? Do you remedy the sin? Do you say you're sorry? Do you make something good come out of it? Right? Yeah, if you have a sexual relation for a marriage, you conceive a child. Okay, that happens. Like, then what do? Do you keep the child or do you abort the child? What's the Catholic response? You keep the child. Maybe you get up for adoption, right? But you did something wrong, but then make it good afterwards. You committed a sin, what do? You go to confession. You make it right. You just get right back on track, right? Some sins have bigger consequences than others, but God will forgive it, all sins equally. So, okay. Homosexual relations. We're talking about sexual acts between two men or two women. Okay, what criteria does it not match? It's not a man and a woman, right? Right? So, and it also can't be open to having children, right? Two women or two men can't conceive a child. So it doesn't match those criteria. Now, people say, but I love them or have a good friendship. Like, we can show why it's harmful to us, but in the natural order, this is the meaning of sexuality. A man and a woman in marriage, the unitive act, open to children. So, and we can revisit these topics and discuss them more. How about same-sex marriage? Now you have marriage, right, in the mix, but it's two men or two women. What criteria does it not satisfy? It's still not a man or a woman. And we would say it's not marriage, actually. Society has redefined marriage, but we don't accept the redefinition. Okay, you took a vote, and you got the majority, so you redefined the word, but I don't accept your redefinition. The word existed before the state of Maryland, right? The word existed since Adam and Eve. So the state of Maryland really can't change the meaning of marriage. You can say that we'll recognize legally a relationship between two men or two women. Fine, but that's not marriage. Again, it's not condemning the individuals. The state even says it's okay. We're just saying it's not going to lead to happiness in the long run. You might think it will, but in the long run it doesn't. Okay, so some other common questions. Pornography. What criteria does it fail in? All four. There's not even there's you and there's nobody else, right? There's a video, right? Unless you're in a club, which is even worse, but it's just, there's no love here at all. It's just self-satisfaction, right? There's no interchange of people. Sexual love is a way of interacting with a person, right? It's a profound way that God gave us. Even when we fall in weakness, God's like, well, there are two people who love each other. Like He's very patient with our weaknesses. But He said, but now make it right. Get back up and correct it. Masturbation. Pornography generally leads to masturbation. Again, there's no man and woman, typically, no marriage, not unitive, not procreative. Very common, it's hard to control our desires. God knows, He is very patient, but keep trying. It's not the end of the world. This is like our desires. St. John Paul called it the sexual urge. Like the urge is strong because God wants us to have children. Because if you don't have children, what happens to the world? It ends in this generation, right? If everyone on the planet says, okay, for the next 40 years, no one has sexual relations. 50 years from now, there's not going to be any more children. Right? We're done. The planet's done. He wants us to have marriage. He wants us to have children. The urge is existential. The existence of the human race rides on it. It's not like a casual, well, maybe we will, maybe we won't. So the desire is very strong. God knows that it's very difficult to control because of original sin, right? Do you remember that big word, the division in our heart? There's a battle going on in our heart because of the original sin of Adam and Eve. There's a brokenness inside of us. Part of us wants to be good, but we like being bad. What do we call that? Do you remember that big word? Concupiscence. Can we say that? Concupiscence. You don't need to know the word to be confirmed. But just know there is a word describing what the heck is going on in my heart. I don't want to do that. I'm not going to do it anymore. For Lent, I'm not going to do it anymore. And what happens a week later? God understands, but never give up the struggle. Never justify. It doesn't make sense, right? What was the purpose of that? It doesn't make sense. It's kind of funny. You've got to laugh at yourself a little bit. It's frustrating and funny, right? We're like satisfying an urge with no particular purpose behind it. Know the purpose of sexual desire, right? Know where it's supposed to lead to. So, what's another big issue today? Birth control. Contraception or the pill. Very common. The Catholic Church teaching is very clear. This is one of those issues where it's people like, I'm not sure I want to become Catholic because of this teaching. So this is an important teaching to wrestle with. Not all Catholics follow this teaching, sadly. But we can also say, look, marriage is in trouble. So many couples are separated. We can acknowledge something's wrong with marriage in American society. And some of you have experienced separation. You know it's not, marriage is good, but it's not easy. What is coming in and kind of corrupting our relationship? There's different things, but the church sees birth control as a big factor. When did the divorce rate skyrocket? It wasn't in the 1920s. It was in the 1970s. What was invented in the 1960s? The birth control pill. And then followed by no-fault divorce. So, but what are the criteria does birth control not follow? Could be man and woman, could be in marriage, could be individual. A lack of openness to having children. Right? Your intention is saying, God, not tonight. And in a sense, God can't do it because biologically He works a certain way, and if you block that biological path, God, I mean, He could just make a baby appear, but He just generally hasn't done it in the history of the human race, right? Even Jesus came through Mary. He didn't have a human father, but at least He had a human mother, right? So you're saying, I understand that sexual intercourse is the way life is conceived, but I don't want it to have that meaning. For me, it doesn't mean that, at least at certain times. You don't really have a right to say what it means or doesn't mean. It has an inherent meaning. And so you try to live according to that meaning. Now, this may not be obvious, right? But if you know you can't conceive a child, and like, well, I've been taking the pill for 2 years, I've been able to conceive a child for 2 years. Does that change that sexual intercourse, that sexual relationship? Like, if you're having love with your spouse, and you know you might conceive a child that night, that's pretty powerful, right? There can be big consequences to what happens tonight, right? It's almost like risky. Not in a bad way, but like, there's nothing casual about it. It's existential. It's beautiful. It's powerful. What is God's plan for our family? We don't know. But you take that out, it is more casual. One of the things about sexual love, it's very easy for it to become love, to shift from love to selfishness. We can use each other. That's why pornography is so powerful. It's complete selfishness. We love it. No consequence. But it's awful, right? It's addictive. It's so addictive. Because you're just feeding a selfishness with no consequence. So, that can happen in marriage. You can use your spouse for pleasure. Instead of giving yourself to your spouse, you can be taking your spouse. And this is where that selfishness so very subtly creeps in. And I think this is a big reason why many marriages separate. Like, I felt like we weren't relating to each other. We weren't loving each other. That's a big issue. We can talk a little more about it. Another big issue of the month, in vitro fertilization. The whole country's talking about it. In Alabama, the judges said, if you conceive an embryo, that's a person. And so you got to treat it like a person. Even if they're stored in a fertility clinic, they're a person. That's what Catholic Church believes. We've always believed that. From the moment of conception, a new human person exists. They're tiny. You can't see them without a microscope. But they have a body and they have a soul. The soul's one cell, big. But it's a new person. It has a different DNA than the mother and the father. So Father Lucan probably talked about this a little bit last week, but once it's conceived, it's a person. It's got a body, and the force of life that's growing on its own is the soul. The soul is our force of life. What happens when you die? Your body and soul are separated. The soul leaves the body. What happens to the body? It decays. The soul is what keeps the body together. It's the life force, right? It's also the mind of the person. But so, in vitro fertilization, okay, what criteria does it not match? Could be a man and a woman. Could be marriage. They want to have children to open their life. What criteria is it missing? Unitive. They're actually not having sexual intercourse. they went to a clinic and they took this reproductive cell of a man with a woman and they combined it in a glass dish. Now the desire for a child is a very good desire, right? A lot of people, they don't want children, but you can't manipulate God to give us a child. A child should always has a right to be conceived in a natural intercourse of a mother and father. Right? A child has a right to always be living in the womb, not in a clinic. Right? Human life is too powerful, yes.
Just a question on that. So I understand
In vitro?
In vitro, yes. But what about artificial insemination? That's different, right?
There are some techniques to help a husband and wife conceive a child naturally. Right? Something is lacking in their biology, right? Maybe it's the woman's egg cells, maybe it's the husband's sperm cells. And there are techniques to try to help facilitate conception through natural intercourse. And those are generally accepted. There's a whole branch of medicine called naprotechnology. N-A-P-R-O, naprotechnology. Which is like if a couple's infertile, well, let's try to figure out why and correct it. It's good medicine. We should be spending more money on it. Rather than say, well, we can do in vitro fertilization, no problem. Whew, slow down. Like, have we investigated this? Like, how long has it been? How long have you been married? How long have you been trying to conceive? Let's get to know your situation. So there are some ways to assist them to have natural intercourse with a child. Yes?
Does the Catholic Church have an opinion of what to do with like all of the embryos that are just like frozen because of IVF that might not like be wanted by their parents? Like,
now this is a delicate topic because some of our parishioners have used in vitro fertilization, and some of our parishioners have been conceived by in vitro fertilization. And you probably know some people who have been as well, and maybe some of you, I don't know. Increasingly there will be. So there's no question about the dignity of the person. Like, you're conceived, you're here, you're one of us. You got to be a saint. You're no different than you have a vocation God has work for you to do. God loves you, knows you, you're destined for heaven. The only thing we're questioning is the way the conception occurred. So someone said, like, well, they might say, well, I was conceived by in vitro fertilization. If they hadn't used that, I wouldn't be here. What are you trying to say, Father? Like, that's true. But also, two 16-year-olds have sexual relations in high school and conceive a child. I'm saying that's the wrong way. You shouldn't have done it. But we love this child. We're glad you're here. We don't want to send you back. But that's not the right way. If someone's conceived through rape, it's good that you're here. You're a person like anyone else with equal dignity, and we love you. But we clearly should not be conceiving children that way. So there's no question about the dignity of the child. We're not condemning the parents. We're just saying we're creating this weird situation. Now, they estimate that 1 million embryos, human embryos, are frozen in the United States, which is interesting because guess how many abortions are on the United States each year? 1 million. So on this side, we're saying, I don't want a child, and I can kill the child because I don't want it. On this side, we're saying, I want it so much, I can make it. And the Catholic Church is saying, no. We're right down the middle. When you're down the middle, you're probably right. Right? Like, and we're not saying that those desires or fears are unfounded. Like, these are big human questions, but they've always been with us. All of this technology was just developed 50 years ago. None of this was even a question 50 years ago. And all of a sudden, same-sex marriage and birth control and in vitro fertilization and abortion pills and gender surgeries and like none of this was even possible. And today, like, what do you mean it's wrong? Where are you coming from? You're like, I'm coming from where the world has always come from for the last 4,000 years. Like, you're just forgetting this is all experimental. And where does this do to society? And what does this do to individuals? So it's not obvious when you start that it's wrong, but when you start to see the consequences. I say there's 2 reasons we shouldn't do in vitro fertilization. Humans make mistakes and humans sin. You don't want to put the creation of life in the hands of people who make mistakes or people who sin. There have been white couples who've given birth to black children and black couples who've given birth to white children because the clinician made a mistake. There have been fertility doctors who had couples come. They bring the husband's sperm cells and the wife's egg cells. He says, thank you. They leave. He throws out the husband's sperm cell. He substitutes his sperm cell. This has happened several times where they've conceived like 40 children. with the clinician's sperm cells. 40 children look like him and don't look like the husband. Because humans sin. We do this, right? You don't put the creation of life in the hands of people who make mistakes. People sin, yes.
But like my question was about like what do you do with like the
Yeah, so what do you do?
embryos
You create this situation. You could say that, if the parents understand now, oh my God, what did we do? They never tell you. They don't give you like these 5 information sessions before you jump in. They want your money. Jump in, and then halfway through you're like, are we doing, what are we doing here? Well, we've already spent several $1,000s, so you might as well just keep going. You get yourself in these awful situations. Same with abortion. Most women don't get information. They're pushed, they're pressured, they do it. They're like, what did I just do? No one walked me through this. No one told me my options. No one told me what the child in my womb looked like. That's usually the case. So you could say, well, the mother ideally would take all those embryos and implant them in her womb. 1 at a time or 2 at a time. She may have children for the next 10 years. Because what do? They conceive more embryos because it's expensive, and if you just conceive 1 and it doesn't implant, then you got to go back and the whole process over again. And then you implant 1, it doesn't implant. Then you got to go back. Like, in a sane society, we would require that. There are a few countries that permit in vitro, but you can only conceive 1 embryo at a time. That's wrong, but it's better, right? It's taking responsibility. Now they'll say, well, conceive 10, we'll put 3 in your womb. They won't all 3 take. Probably maybe 1. Well, what if all 3 do? It's generally not healthy to carry triplets. Now, if it happens, it happens. But you just made it happen, right? You're risking your life and the children's lives. You're creating embryos that are going to, a lot of them are going to die, and you know they're going to die. But they're your children. But you don't think of them as your children. Think about sex. Think about it. Walk down that road, right? Read the articles. Read the catechism. There's a clinic in California that's trying to figure out how to conceive a child from 2 men. Or 2 women. And they're very close. They're very close. So you're going to be a child who technically, in a sense, has 2 dads. It's like asexual reproduction. That's what we're trying to do it. Like we're putting money to figure out how to do it. It's not like they're trying to make it happen. There is 0 limits. There is 0 limits on biotechnologies today. There's no ethical guidance. If we can do it, we do it. It's a dangerous world. Because these are people. We're so psychologically fragile, all of us, right? Like tomorrow you wake up and like, this is a bad day. Like, well, what's a bad day? I don't know, but it's a bad day. You say, I'm in a bad mood and I don't even know why, right? I'm not motivated to work, I can't smile. I'm like, but if you know, you're not even sure who your identity is, who your parents are, or how you were conceived. Or there was 3 of us, but only one of us survived, so I had like a 30% chance of survival. Maybe I'm not even supposed to be here. Maybe my brother or sister should have been here. Sometimes they'll abort several of the embryos in the womb because I didn't want triplets, I just wanted 1. Eeny, meeny, miny, moe. We just create these horrific scenarios which the parents didn't want. They just never were walked through the process. I know I had a couple, and she and her husband came in, and they're like, well, my egg cells aren't fruitful, so I'd like to get my sister's egg cell and combine it with my husband's sperm cell and then put it in my womb. Just like your sister having sex with your husband, like what are you talking about? Your child will be her child. You don't want to do that, but you haven't thought about it. I've had another couple where they bought an egg cell because her cell wasn't working, and combined with the husband, she gave birth, and she's like, it's not really my child. I don't think I want it. Like, you created it. You gotta keep it, and you gotta love it. It's just strange. It just goes down such a dark path. And it's not really what's intended at the beginning. We talk about birth control. There is an alternative, right? There's natural family planning. God, our biology, who took biology in high school? Do you know how life is conceived? An egg cell and sperm cell are combined. Do you know how long the egg cell lives in the woman's body? 1-2 days? Do you not know when the sperm cell is in the woman's? A sperm cell can live about 3 days, 4 days? So, 4 to 5? Or 3 to 5?
3 to 5.
3 to 5? Okay, so there's your window, right? You have sexual relations, that sperm cell can last for another 5 days. And so if that crosses over with the 1 or 2 days of the egg cell being released, you could conceive a child. But if you don't have sexual relations within that 5-day period, 5, 6, 7 days, a week, you can't conceive a child. It's biologically impossible. You need an egg cell and a sperm cell. I'm not making this up, right? This is biology. So if you can, but a woman's body gives signs indicating when she's fertile, when she's releasing the egg cell. If you can identify those signs, you know when you could conceive. So if you want to have a child, be intimate at that week. If you don't want to have a child, don't be intimate at that week. It takes some study, it takes some conversation, which is really harmful to marriage when husbands and wives are talking to each other, communicating. It's really, it's a downer. But the divorce rate in the United States is about 50%. The divorce rate of those who use natural family planning is like 5%. It's not magic. Honey, we did it, we're good. No, it's because you're talking to each other, you're discerning your family life, you're discerning children. I know we said we didn't want another child, but why did we not want another child? You know what? We have a nice romantic weekend, and I'm okay if we have another child. You're talking, right? You're communicating, and children aren't the worst thing in the world. It fosters a certain openness. Like God's symbolic. If God doesn't want us to have a child, He's not going to let us. If He does, then okay, maybe. But you're always. But if you use birth control for the last 5 years, you're like, honey, can we talk about children? Not tonight. And you can't force them to talk about it. So there's just. And in natural family planning, sometimes the month you have to practice self-control. You say, no, we're not going to express our love sexually. We're going to go out on a date. We're going to go out for dinner. Or we're going to walk. We're going to watch a movie. You're practicing self-control, which is a virtue. Right? You're growing in respect for each other, and you're treating your sexuality with a certain reverence. You're recognizing the power of existential. So it's the best kept secret because there's zero money to be made in natural family planning. Billions of dollars in birth control, zero in natural family planning. The good news is, though, there's new phone apps that help you kind of track your cycles. Not all women's cycles are the same, but there's so much study and research around this now. There's classes and teaching couples in our area, so it's something we want to learn about. Okay, questions? Any of those issues? So many issues, yes.
What about the case where a woman could get pregnant, but high probability that the fetus won't come to term, due to medication or some other medical condition?
So it's might you use birth control at that time?
Well, I don't.
Well, no, that's a question, but that question comes up I'm taking cancer treatment, and if I conceive a child, it might kill the baby. So, you really should abstain from having sexual relations, because you're fighting for your life. You're taking a power from there are times when you shouldn't conceive a child, right? But if you're going to have relations, then use natural family planning very carefully. So, and some of it is we're not completely in control. We do the best we can. God's got we're working with God. Sometimes people take the birth control pill as to regulate a cycle. That's fine as long as you're not having sexual relations. If you're in high school, you're using that to regulate your cycle, fine. But if you're having sexual relations, that's a sin too, right? In addition to the birth control. But if you're using birth control, you're probably more likely to have sexual relations because you can't conceive a child. These natural motivations that God gives us, if you take them away, the whole. We just legalized prostitution in New York City. Yeah. This is not leading to respect for women, right? This is not leading to joyful sexual relations. Pornography, it's so addictive. So many good men are struggling, they're addicted, they want to stop. Women too, but men, predominantly women too increasingly. What's healthy or joyful about that, right? And the people caught up in it. How sad, right?
Is it prostitution for men as well?
Sure. Men and women. It's mostly. But men too. So, like, you get into sexual questions, it can get dark. But it's supposed to be beautiful. It's about marriage. It's about family. It's about children, right? It's supposed to be happy, healthy, and holy. As a society, we've made it very twisted and confusing and dark. Catholic Church loves our sexuality, wants to preserve it. It knows some people have same-sex attraction. That is hard. That is really hard. No one chooses. It's in the Bible. It's in the book of Genesis. It's always been around. Some people, for different reasons, have same-sex attraction. But we say, well, then you're not called to have marriage. You're not called to be married, right? So you're called to live celibacy. Like me. Like, even in the church, we have a model for this. We have priests and religious sisters who aren't called to have sexual relations in families. Right? It's not the same, but we're all called to holiness in different ways, right? To live it out in different ways. We're not condemning people. We're just saying, let's try to figure out God's plan for your life. Right? Sex isn't the be-all and end-all of life. Right? There are many other ways to love people. Sexual love is one way. It's not the only one, of course. So put in that perspective, and I really encourage you, some of these issues you may struggle with, some of you may be living out some of this. Go to the Catechism, read the section, ponder it, right? Go to the Theology of the Body, Google Theology of the Body, and that word, and then see what it says about that, right? Go deeper in the Church's teaching. We did it in 25 minutes, right? Each of those topics you could do a course on in college. So, but we hope in this process of RCIA, OCIA, we trust the Church. Is there a God?
Yes.
Is Jesus God?
Yes.
Is Jesus found in the Catholic Church?
Yes.
We need to know. Right? Those are the three fundamental questions. There's a million other questions, but those are the three. If Jesus founded the Catholic Church, is there to guide us? We can trust it. The members of the Church are sinners. Always were, always will be. But the teachings that come through the Church give us the guidance, right? So trust the Church, but learn. It's not a blind faith. Really, really smart and really, really holy. Pope John Paul talked about this for 13 years, right? So he's a saint. So don't be afraid to question and learn.